Okay, hello everybody, welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us today. So in our session today, we'll be talking about how you can improve your case for the Emerald CEEMAN competition. We'll be providing some author tips and details on how you can submit to the competition. So I just want to start with a couple of housekeeping items. The webinar today will last an hour, but we will be recording it. So feel free to share with colleagues when we send the recording round to you. There is going to be time for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. But if you want to ask questions as we're going along, please feel free to put those in the question panel, which you'll find on the right-hand side of your screen in the GoToWebinar viewer. My name is Andrea Longrig. I am a marketing manager at Emerald Publishing, and I'll introduce our presenters for today. So first we have Olga, who is the Director of CEEMAN, the International Association for Management Development in Dynamic Societies, which unites over 200 members from 53 countries all over the world. We also welcome Leif, who is the Professor of Financial Management at IMD Business School. And finally, from Emerald, we have Gabi Rundle, who is our cases publisher, who will talk about the logistics of the competition and how you can enter. And she'll also tell you a little bit about our Emerald Cases Hub. So before we start today, we'd actually like to do a couple of polls with you. So I'm just going to launch the first one. So the first poll is, have you already written your case study? So answer either yes, or still working on it, or not yet. I'll just give you a minute or so just to fill that in. Okay. So 11% of you are saying yes, 78% are still working on it, and 11% not yet thinking about it. And then the next poll we have is, let me just launch this one. So have you submitted to the CEEMAN case competition? The yes or no. Just give you a minute just to complete that. Okay, so 30% say yes and 70% no. Okay, so they were the two polls that we wanted to do. So now I will hand you over to Olga. I'll just get the slides up.
Thank you, Andrea. Hi, everyone. It's good to have you with us. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your interest in the CEEMAN and Emerald case writing competition. So I will just tell you a couple of words about CEEMAN, just to provide some background and explain why we started with case studies and what we do in this respect. So CEEMAN was originally established as a Central and Eastern European Management Development Association back in 1993. But then we saw very quickly that the issues of transition and change, they're relevant for a number of other markets, not only in Europe, but also in Africa, in Asia, Latin America. And that's how we have grown to include more than 200 members from 50+ countries, but still focusing more on dynamic societies or emerging markets. Andrea, if you could maybe put the next slide. Yeah, next one. Yeah, so from the very beginning, we put our focus on developing management teaching. And for that, we worked with a number of faculty development programs. And of course, also, if we talk about teaching skills, we cannot talk about teaching materials as well. And certainly case studies have been one of the core teaching methods and materials in management education since the very beginning. But there was a strong lack of cases relevant for the needs of emerging markets, of Central and Eastern Europe, of other dynamic societies. So that's why we started also with the case writing competition already in 1996, very quickly after CEEMAN was established. And since then, we have run it every year. And from 2007, we have started our collaboration with Emerald and their emerging markets case collection. And Leif is also with us since 2007 as a member of the jury of the case writing competition, providing very good insight and feedback always to our cases and to our competition. I mean, we have Leif is representing IMD Lausanne, and we have worked with IMD for a number of years, both on the case writing competition and development of case teaching skills and overall faculty development in CEEMAN. So our aim is to promote the creation and use of local cases, of relevant cases, focusing on emerging markets. And with that also the promotion and development of case writing skills and collaboration with business. This is offered through the competition, publication opportunities with Emerald, and of course, very valuable is the feedback that authors get for the further development of their cases. So here on the picture, you can see actually an image from our award ceremony. We always have the awards for the case writing competition winners at the CEEMAN annual conference at the end of September. This particular one was taking place in Prague, and you can see Leif in the middle and the winners from China, I believe from CEEB's business school, receiving their prize at the conference. So also this year, we hope that the winners will be able to join us in person or at least through online connection at the CEEMAN annual conference at the end of September in Trieste in Italy. Andrea, next slide, please. Thank you. On the prizes side, from CEEMAN, in addition to the Emerald Prize money and publication opportunities, we offer scholarships for our flagship, we call it flagship faculty development program. International Management Teachers Academy has been running for more than 20 years now, and we have worked with close to 700 management teachers in 51 countries, helping them develop their teaching skills, especially working with in case teaching, case writing, but also other aspects of the management teachers profession, such as balancing the research and teaching, often consulting and administrative responsibilities, working with different types of audiences, applying different teaching tools and techniques to facilitate better learning experience. So also this year, we hope that the winners will be able to join us in August at IMTA. Otherwise, it will also be open for next year. Yeah, so this year the program will be from 8th to 16th of August 2001 in beautiful Bled, Slovenia, the picture that you saw on the first slide. And we hope that it will be possible still to run it in person, you know, now with vaccinations on the way and the situation hopefully improving by then. We would be very happy to welcome everyone in Slovenia with us. Next slide, please. Yeah, so one of the things that we do at IMTA, we put a strong emphasis on case method. It's a very practical program, very hands-on, so everyone gets a chance to teach a case and to discuss different issues and questions related to teaching with cases or writing cases, both with faculty and peers. And very characteristic part of the program is personal connections and long-term partnerships that stem from it. So it combines two parts, both general pedagogical issues as well as disciplinary tracks. And this year we are offering also individual online coaching after the program. So if you're interested to look more about IMTA, you can visit our website or you can write me. The early registration deadline is already in May, but of course for participants of the case writing competition, we will be waiting for the competition results and extend it further. So thank you so much. That's all from me. I have just one thank you on the next slide. And again, to start with a nice picture of Bled and conclude also with nice nature and environment where IMTA is taking place, where CEEMAN is located. We're always happy to collaborate both with Emerald and with Leif as our judge in the case writing competition. And without taking too much time from the substance of the webinar, thank you so much, Leif. Please take over with your contribution. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the webinar.
Okay, everybody, I'm very happy to meet you, even though I can't really see you. Most of you are new to case writing, and I think that's just perfect. In the last week or so, I've been reading 23 case submissions to the case competition. I give early feedback on those, and I want to share some of that feedback. What I strongly recommend for those of you who are new to case writing, the first thing is read the instructions before you submit to the journal. We get lots of submissions where people have really clearly not read the instructions and they make mistakes or they do things that they shouldn't be doing. The second one is take a look at an award-winning case and teaching note. Those are usually really good examples what we are looking for, both cases and teaching notes. But what makes a good case, or what is a case in the first situation? It's not an academic article, it's different. It's a story. So the first thing is that we are telling a story about a specific management dilemma. A good case, of course, should be relevant and interesting. But the key here is the dilemma. The dilemma is typically a decision. So it's about a person, a business person, who has to make a decision. The decision is not obvious, meaning two reasonable people could disagree what is the best possible outcome. In some of the cases I've been reading, the dilemma is not clear. So make sure that it's clear. I usually recommend that you state it up front. So whoever's reading the case, they'll know that this case is about this specific issue. In addition to this, we have a protagonist. That is the person who is about to make the decision or who has to solve that dilemma. And sometimes there's interaction between the dilemma and the protagonist. So the solution could be different if it was a different person in that situation. Just to give an example, a case I read a few days ago, on page 20, after reading 20 pages, the dilemma was finally introduced. That's not ideal. So try to do it up front. In some cases, there's no dilemma at all. So you read the case and you are not sure what this is all about. You can also go in the other direction, the other extreme. You can have too many dilemmas. So it's okay to have 1, 2, maybe 3, definitely not too many, but make sure that it's clear. This is what the case is all about. The case should not be too easy, because that is not really relevant. It should also not be too difficult. And too difficult happens all the time in the sense that there's not enough information in the case to solve the case, which means that only the person who wrote the case knows what's going on. So make sure that there's enough information in the case. Still keep it short. We prefer short cases, but it should be able to answer all the questions that you assign based on what you read in the case and based on some general academic and business knowledge. Be unbiased. So ideally, you should be like the traditional BBC reporter. You should present both sides of a story. You should not take sides. That is sometimes quite difficult if you are close to the case, but basically look at yourself as a BBC reporter reporting on an issue. Try to make it controversial. Why controversial? Because students will remember. And ideally, we learn in case discussions, we learn by discussing, arguing, and trying to convince each other. And if it's more controversial and less obvious what is the ideal outcome, you will learn more throughout the process of trying to convince other people. And I mentioned be unbiased, and I mentioned keep it short. So those are some of the key things to keep in mind when you write a case. Let's move on to the next slide, which is the teaching note. So the teaching note is actually, if you submit the case competition, You will be judged mainly based on the teaching note. The case, of course, should be very good, but it's the teaching note that makes the difference. We expect a detailed teaching plan. So if you have a 90-minute class session, basically minute by minute, this is what the class should look like. Of course, it's a suggestion because everybody will teach it in their own way. We will make modifications, but we want to see a clear plan how to do it. The number one mistake in the submissions I've seen so far is not to have detailed answers to the assignment questions. Sometimes there are no answers at all, but they tend to be too short. So really, if you want to win the case competition, you need to provide a good answer to each question you assign, but ideally, maybe even two answers. Show one answer which is outstanding and show one answer which is marginally acceptable. It's acceptable, but it's clearly not outstanding. Very typically, the answers are too generic. So I just read the page. It was a 20-page case. And the question was, what should the company do next? And the answer was, they need to do more market research. Okay, I don't need to read a case 20 pages to come to the conclusion and recommendation that the company should do more market research. I could answer that immediately. So it's too general. You need to give specific answers building on the specific case facts in order to have a good answer to the question. Link the case and the case dilemma to the questions. So the teaching note and the case need to be linked. That does not always happen. I want to give another example of a case I read a few days ago, where in the case, the dilemma was very well framed. It was upfront, and at the end of the case, they said that the company needs to decide on two things. What is the correct distribution model going forward? And they were talking about two different alternatives. And how can we expand this concept from Asia to Africa? There are two problems with this. The first one is that there was absolutely no information in the case to answer those questions. So it was impossible to answer based on the case. And in the teaching note, those questions were not even mentioned. So you have a case, you have a teaching note, they are not connected. And that is definitely not going to give you an award in the case competition if there's not a tight connection between the case and the teaching note. What can be generalized? This is something that even experienced case writers miss sometimes. So a case is typically a sample of one. And we are all academics. We know that the sample of one is not statistically valid. That's not the point here. But you are highly unlikely to be in exactly the same situation again. So you need to think about what can we learn from this sample of one that we can generalize and apply to similar situations, including the limitations. When can we not apply this concept? This is usually the kind of final thing. If you manage to include this in your teaching note, you are likely to do quite well. Let me check. Yes, I mentioned here academic articles. So another submission I looked at, there was a case, again, about 25 pages long, which is way too long. And in addition, in the teaching note, there were 6 academic articles assigned. So first of all, 6 articles and the 25-page case for a 90-minute session is way too much. I know my students will never read all of that. 80% of the session was designed based on the 6 academic articles. So basically, it was a discussion about academic articles with 5, 10, 15 minutes of case discussion added on. That's fine if you want to teach that way, but for a case journal and a case competition, it's not fine. What we recommend in this case is to provide 2 different teaching plans. The one you intend to do with the academic articles, and then a second teaching plan, which is based on the case alone. Nothing but the case. How would you teach it? And as I said, I have a few submissions like that. And the final one is prerequisites. So if you assign articles or other prerequisites, please make it clear that these are absolutely essential. You need to read these in order to benefit from the case discussion. And these are optional. They are nice to have, but they are not absolutely essential. Don't assign 10 different readings. It's not realistic. People don't read those. Only assign it if it's absolutely essential. You can have as many as you want as optional. That's completely up to you. But try to keep it reasonable in terms of workload, because if you over-assign things, the students are not going to read it, they are not well prepared, and you don't have a good case discussion. So these are some insights based on the submissions for the case competition this year. They're very similar to what I've seen in the past. And I think I should maybe stop at this point and see if there are any questions before we move on.
No, I can't see any questions at the moment in the chat, but as they come through, I'll read them out. Or so everybody, don't forget to put your questions just in the chat box at the right-hand side. That's great, thank you, Leif. Okay, so next we have Gabi.
Hi everyone. Thanks everyone for your time today, and obviously for your interest in submitting to the Emerald CEEMAN case competition. I think the polls at the beginning were really interesting, so it's nice to see that we've got a bit of a mix of authors who have submitted to the case competition before, and authors kind of new to the competition, and as well kind of seeing that you're at different stages within the case writing process for this year. So it's kind of nice to know there's a bit of a mix there. And I want to say thank you again to Olga and Leif for your time today and your participation as always in the competition. So thank you for that. So I'm Gabi Rundle. I'm the cases publisher here at Emerald, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about kind of the technical side of submitting to the competition and the author resources that we have available to you. So if you can just go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So all of the cases submitted to this competition will be considered for publication in our Emerging Markets Case Studies collection. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about, we call it EMCS as a publication outlet. So it's a collection of high quality teaching cases, including authentic examples of organisational challenges within emerging markets. So it's really kind of a very broad scope in terms of geography and region that we allow cases based in, as well as kind of all areas of business management disciplines are welcome for submissions to this. We welcome submissions to the collection at any point. So if you are maybe thinking about, you're interested in submitting to the competition, but you know that you're not going to have a case ready, maybe for another kind of few months. So this year's competition might not be kind of a suitable timescale for you. I mean, we run this competition on an annual basis, and obviously I'll talk a little bit about the prize funds at the end, but we are open to submissions to EMCS at any point. Also, I'm open if any of you are interested in being a reviewer or proposing a special section in the collection. I'm kind of always open to take feedback on board. So my email address is on there. So please do let me know if kind of outside of the scope of the competition, if there's anything you would kind of like to be more involved in the Emerging Markets Case Studies collection, that would be great. I've got a link there to view the collection, and we've also put together a virtual issue of winning cases. Sorry, there's a typo there. So Leif mentioned in one of his first slides, reading an award-winning case is something that kind of he would really recommend, and I would second that. So the second link there has got the top 3 cases, I think, for the past 3 or 4 years that have won that competition. There's a link there as well to the whole collection, and I'll talk a little bit in a second about the Emerald Cases Hub. If your institution doesn't have access to the Emerging Markets Case Studies collection, you won't be able to log in and view that virtual issue. So we've got a number of sample cases on the hub for you to have a look at, because, as Leif said, we completely understand that having exposure to these cases and teaching notes is really important when you're writing your own. So they're there if you've got access, and if you don't, they'll be on the hub. So can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So again, quite a few links on this slide. I do apologise. So to submit a case to the competition, there's a link there to the submission site. So again, that's the standard submission site. If you've made a submission to EMCS before, but not as part of the competition, it's a very similar process. You're just asked at one point if you're submitting this as a competition, and CEEMAN 2021 will be an option. So please just ensure that you select that. So your case will go to Leif and the other judges and will be considered for this. Again, if you have any issues with that, please do email me at the time. Leif also mentioned the importance of reading the author guidelines before submitting, and again, I do think that's really important. There's a link to the guidelines there. And on the guidelines, there are links to a case writing guide, teaching note guide. There's a teaching note template on there that I would really encourage you to have a look through. You know, as Leif said, again, kind of repeating a lot of what you've said here, but the judging, the teaching note is, you know, a huge part of the submission, and so I would really urge you to kind of focus your efforts on that. And I think, yeah, reading the author guidelines and looking through the author resources that we have there would be really beneficial to anyone considering submitting. In cases should have a developing and emerging markets focus. So again, it's the cases submitted to this do need to meet the scope of the emerging markets case studies collection. So that's important as well. All cases should be teaching cases based on a real situation in a real company with a clear decision-making situation, and you need to ensure that all necessary permissions have been cleared prior to submission. So if you have conducted primary research within an organisation, we would need a case study consent from that organisation, which just means that as a publisher, we can publish the content that's in the case study. If you have only conducted secondary research, we don't need that case study consent. This is something I wanted to mention as well. We are open to cases based on secondary data. They don't have to be you don't have to have conducted primary research, but we would suggest wherever possible that you do. And we do find that the cases that tend to win the competition, the authors have spent time within that organisation, they've spent time with the protagonist, so their voice really comes across in a way that's very difficult when you're only doing secondary research. So I would really, if at all possible, please do try and kind of, yeah, have that kind of primary research and make sure the kind of the tone is really kind of strong throughout. But we do allow cases just based on secondary research. The deadline is the 16th of May. So I just kind of wanted to stress that, make sure, you know, we're getting quite close to that now. And the Emerald Cases Hub, so the link to that is there, and I can see that Andrea, thank you, has put this in the chat. So as I mentioned, if you go on here, there are a number of sample cases, including one written by the Emerging Markets Case Studies collection editor. So again, I think that's a good example of the kind of thing that we publish and would be really worth you having a look at. So the Cases Hub is a free online resource that anyone can access. There's no cost at all associated with that. We developed it with a lot of help from our EMCS editorial team. And it starts off with a module on how to write cases and teaching notes, and takes you through every stage of the case writing process. So from kind of why write a case study to kind of how to decide what your kind of topic is going to be, how to find, you know, get in touch with an organisation, all the way through to developing the teaching note and tips for submission or revision. And there's also some content on there on how to teach using cases, and most recently a module on how to teach online using case studies that we added during the pandemic last year. So I would really suggest, if you are considering submitting to this, that you do have a look on there. If possible, Andrea, can we play that video now? This is just a very short clip. This is of Dr. Michael Goldman, the EMCS editor, talking about tips on writing a teaching note. So I thought this was quite a good example of the kind of content that we have on there that might be useful for you if you are kind of working towards that May deadline and have about a month left to kind of polish off your case study. So let's
Okay,
see
here's the video.
Oh, apologies, sorry, I might have included the wrong link there, so that seems to have cut out. But again, a very kind of quick example of the kind of content is on there, and I really would urge you to log on and have a look through the writing modules if you're considering submitting to this. Some of the feedback we've had about the Cases Hub is that authors have kind of varying stages of their case writing career find that really useful. So we've had authors who have submitted to EMCS or published in the EMCS kind of 4 or 5 times, will still go on and will look at a very specific module. So it might be on learning objectives. That's the bit they kind of need a bit of a refresher on. If you're a newer case author, kind of working your way through all of the content on there, we've had feedback that people find that really useful. So I really would encourage you to use that resource. And then finally, Olga kind of mentioned the CEEMAN side of the prizes in terms of the kind of the scholarships there. Emerald provide a total prize fund for the top 3 cases of €4,000. And then just I wanted to clarify again that all cases submitted are considered for publication in the Emerging Markets Case Studies collection, and we do pay authors £100 upon publication of their case study. So if you don't win the case competition, your case could still go on to be accepted. There might be revisions required, but there would still be a £100 payment at the end of the process if your case is accepted in the Emerging Markets Case Studies collection. So kind of we've got quite a bit of time now, so I feel like I've raced through that. Apologies. So have we got any questions at the minute?
Yes, we do. So the first question is: getting permission from company mandatory if we use secondary data from databases?
So good question. So if you're only using secondary data, so everything is available in the public domain, then we don't require case study consent. It's only if you have spent time within the company or conducted interviews or done primary research or got access to, for example, financial data from an organisation, we would require their permission. But if it's something that they've already published that's in the public domain, we don't need their permission for that because they've already put that out there publicly. So any kind of quotes or any public financial information, anything like that, we don't need case study consent for. We ask that in the teaching note you include a research method section. Again, this is all on the author guidelines, and that just helps us know what your research methods are and if we do require consent. So sometimes if an author doesn't provide that information, it might well be that we later ask, why haven't you got case study consent? And then an author has to clarify, well, I didn't think I needed it because I only did secondary research. We just ask that you clarify what your research methods are, so we kind of don't go back and ask you for that.
Can I add, it's extremely important that you reference everything.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, Leif. Yes, so again, even if things are in the public domain, you do have permission to use that, but it absolutely still needs to be adequately referenced. And I think, you know, even if there's yeah, it just needs to be clear where that information has come from, and obviously, you know, if that information has come from the organisation that your case study is based on, you know, it kind of adds to the value of your case. But also, you know, like any kind of other academic output, everything needs to be fully referenced. And again, the referencing guidelines are on the author guidelines.
Great, thank you. And just to let everybody know that I have added all those links that Gabi was sharing in the chat, so everyone should be able to access those. Okay, so we've got another question. If the case is not decision centric but more on problem diagnosis or management evaluation, is it at a disadvantage for the competition?
So when we tell you about the good case and so on, there are no absolute rules. I mean, you can do things that are not standard. I couldn't give you a specific answer without seeing what you have done. And in cases like this, we really strongly recommend that you use the service we have where you submit early and you get one round of feedback where we can give you specific feedback. But you should write the kind of case you need yourself, and of course also thinking about potential other users. So please go ahead, and then we give you feedback based on the specific case you submit.
Great, thank you. And we do have a question about access, so we'll just follow up on that one after the webinar. Yep. So we'll follow up on that one. Let me see. I find it difficult to get permission to publish from the management of the company. The company has changed its management, the name of the company, and now the company I am writing about does not formally exist. Can I participate?
So when, sorry,
it's quite a long process. Ah, she's just put it twice. Yeah. So can she participate in the case competition?
What I would say is when things aren't kind of as clear cut. So we have on the Cases Hub, there's an FAQ on rights and permissions that, again, I think you know, I'd like to point out is a really great resource. When there are situations like this that aren't very clear-cut situations, sometimes we do have to look at them on an individual basis. So what I would do is I would suggest you reach out to me on my email address and give a bit more information, because we have a designated dedicated rights team who we can go to with these kind of more complicated queries, but there are absolutely instances where we will allow a case where you know, very often we have cases about the liquidation of a company, for example, so that company then doesn't exist by the time a case is published. So we understand that there are ways that we can still publish that content, and it depends on whether or not it's been taken over by another company, or whether it kind of just has ended and that company doesn't exist anymore, and kind of who owns the information, etc., that you had kind of visibility of. So I would say, so it's not a very helpful answer, but I would reach out to me on my email address and give a bit more information about that, and we can kind of speak to our rights team about it. But I would say that we work with authors, so wherever possible in these situations, we can still publish your work. In very rare circumstances, and this isn't something I want to kind of suggest that authors do as standard, but we can, in some circumstances, allow an organisation to be disguised, and we still ask that the true organisation give their consent for the case to be published. But for example, if you change their name, their location, the details of the financial data still have to make sense, but if you disguise it, so someone reading the case wouldn't know who the real company is. If the company are happy that you've made all of those changes, they can still grant consent to that case study, even though you don't actually name the company in the case. So I hope that makes sense. So that's one option that we do sometimes work with authors to do. But yeah, please do reach out, and I can try and offer you a bit more information on that.
And can I add, it happens all the time, unfortunately. You write a case and something happens and you don't get the consent. So I have at least 5 or 6 cases I wrote that were never published because of this. It's extremely important when you start the case to make sure that you know that the person who has the right to sign off of the case is in the loop and understands what you're doing before you start the case writing process.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Leif. And yeah, obviously, you know, kind of the course of the case writing process takes a long time. There's obviously these things can change, but I think, yeah, absolutely being transparent with an organisation when you start writing the case about what it is that what the outlet will be is really important. And we do find, for the most part, organisations quite happy to work with authors. It is just, yeah, when these things change, and it's quite difficult to kind of continue working with an organisation, that things can be quite difficult, unfortunately. Were there any other questions?
Yes, we've got one here. How many learning objectives would you expect to be included?
I wouldn't give an exact number. I mean, it could be even 1, but typically 2, 3, 4. When you get to 6, 7, 8, 9, I think it's too many. It's confusing.
Yeah, I would say, sorry, I feel like I sound like a broken record. But again, on the Cases Hub, there is kind of a specific kind of mini course on learning objectives, and there's an interactive section there where you can use you kind of enter in so is it undergrad, postgrad, kind of what level it is that your case is for, and it takes you to Bloom's taxonomy, which is what we kind of suggest that authors use for those kind of the outcomes there. So again, I would suggest looking at the hub for that, and it talks in a bit more detail about kind of how to structure your learning objectives.
Okay, and another one here. If I don't win, will my case still be published?
So potentially. So as I said, all cases submitted go into consideration in the Emerging Markets Case Studies collection. And once they've been judged, they will then go into the peer review process, which is a separate process. So we would let you know, for example, a month after the deadline, that unfortunately your case hasn't been successful at being one of the top 3 cases. Your case is now going into the peer review process, and following that, your case would be given an accept, reject, or a revision decision. And I would suggest that in the Emerging Markets Case Studies collection, we do work very closely with authors to develop their cases into the best possible version of their case. So very often major revisions are given, and we would ask you to make, you know, a certain number of edits. The reviewers and the associate editors would give you feedback, and so it may well be that yes, your case could be accepted, or it could be asked that we ask you to revise the case, and it could later go on to be accepted. So yes, that is a possibility that your case would still be accepted even if it didn't win the case, if you didn't win the competition. But I would expect in most cases some edits would be required before it being accepted straight away if it wasn't a winning case, but potentially yes.
Okay, another one here. How should I approach a business I might be interested in writing a case about? Any tips?
The obviously best way is through personal contacts, personal network. If you don't know any person inside the organization, you can try cold calling. I mean, basically send them a letter or email, explain what you're trying to do, and if you're lucky, it may work. It has worked for me a couple of times. It has also failed a number of times. So it's not the easiest way of doing it, but the best way is to use personal contacts.
Okay, that makes sense. Is the teaching note compulsory?
Yes,
absolutely.
So, yes, we'll let Leif add this, but I would say the teaching note is not only compulsory, but teaching note is kind of the most important part of the submission. I'll kind of pass over to Leif to talk a little bit more if you've kind of got more to add, but yes, absolutely, it's required.
And it's usually for first-time case writers, it's the most difficult part. And a very typical mistake is that you write a case and then after you start thinking about the teaching note, and that's a big mistake. You need to think about the teaching note and the teaching plan before you write the case. Otherwise, you will not have a good fit. I usually, when people ask how long should a case be, I usually tell them that the teaching note should be 4 times longer than the case. That's an award-winning case material. So if you have a 5-page case and a 20-page teaching note, that's kind of what we're looking for. What we normally get is a 20-page case with a 3-page teaching note, and that's not really going to win.
Makes sense. And I've got another question just come in here. Is the role play a good method during the case testing phase in class teaching?
I would say yes, just don't overuse it. I mean, if you can use role play a few times, but if you keep on using it all the time, it's not, it's overusing it. It's also a good way while you're writing the case to kind of look at the different stakeholders and do a bit of role play to get their perspective.
And if I can just add to that, actually, it's something I didn't mention, but we do ask, and I think we do find that the best cases submitted are ones that have been test taught prior to submission. So that is something we ask authors do before submitting their case. And it's just kind of a way of, you're almost completing your own review on the case. You know, if you can go in and teach that, then it's, the teaching note kind of makes sense. If you struggle to just use the teaching note in the class, then you kind of know yourself that certain edits need to be made. And we do find that sometimes what some authors find quite useful is before submitting their case, give the case in a teaching note to a colleague. So someone who isn't familiar with the background to the case, and someone, so not a co-author, not someone who's done all of this background research, and see if your colleague can use your teaching note and get the learning objectives, have the students meet the learning objectives, and they can give you some honest feedback at the end. So they might well say that, you know, we hit the first 2 learning objectives, but the 3rd one was just a bit too comprehensive, and the case, you know, we only had kind of 90 minutes, so we didn't quite get that far. Or they might say that, for example, the sample questions, some were really good, some felt quite basic, and they should be kind of more advanced. So we do ask that, yeah, where possible, the cases should be test taught prior to submission, and that doesn't have to be done by you as the author. It could be done by a colleague, but that's kind of entirely up to you. But I would recommend, where possible, that you do test it and then revise it based on kind of your own feedback, or potentially the feedback of the colleague. That would be great.
Great. And can you please explain how to cite references in the case? Is there any difference with articles?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, go on, Leif.
No, go ahead first.
I was just going to say, so EMCS uses a APA referencing system. So again, everything is within the author guidelines, and I would have a look at that, and that shows you kind of in detail how to structure them. So again, they're in the chat, and I would suggest you kind of do read through and make sure that they're kind of adequately referenced.
I would recommend using endnotes for references and footnotes for clarifications.
Great. So I think that's all the questions, actually. I can't see any new ones in the chat.
Brilliant.
Right.
Please, you know, if you have any questions after the webinar has ended, or you need any help when it comes to submitting your case, I do just kind of wanted to stress that my email is there. So if anyone did want to reach out on any follow-up questions or technical questions about submitting, please do let me know.
Yeah, and I wanted just to add, maybe, you know, because most of the authors come from institutions, so please do not hesitate approaching your colleagues, your peers, your superiors, even your students for support, you know, because they can provide you with feedback, they can provide you with ideas, also in terms of searching for company to approach. Your alumni network of your school would be a very powerful resource, how to find the company, how to approach the key contacts there, how to maybe identify some key issues that can be used in the classroom. So please, do not hesitate just to reach out and get as much feedback on your case during the process as you can. And your institution is there to support you in any case, because it's also in their interest both to support you as a case writer, to support the production of high quality case material. And of course, also the cases are a wonderful tool to stay in touch with the practice, to stay in touch with business, and to bring real issues, real life issues into the classroom.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Olga. Thank you, Leif. Thank you, Gabi. And we'll be sending round the recording of this webinar to you, so you can rewatch it. And again, all the links and everything are in this webinar chat for people to access. So that's great. Thank you very much, everybody.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and good luck.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.